أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. So we said that the way that the muttaqi, or the one that has taqwa, speaks is he speaks with what's right. As we are meant to be examples to the people. Unfortunately, people have a bad image of Islam due to the portrayal of Islam by certain Muslims. The Muslims are perceived to be angry people. They are perceived to be violent people. They are perceived to be ravenous. They are perceived to be the last people that you would encounter in a dark alley. The last people that you want to meet in the wrong place. But on the contrary, when the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam is asked, what is a Muslim? He says, Al-Muslim man salim al-nas min yadihi wa lisanih. In one tradition, it says, Man salim al-nas, or Man salim al-muslimun, min yadihi wa lisani. One tradition says, a Muslim is someone who the Muslims are safe from his hands and are safe from his tongue. In another tradition, it says the people. A Muslim is someone whom the people are safe from his hands and safe from his tongue. That if a Muslim walks past you, you should feel in the state of aman, the state of safety, a state of security. And we are meant to be examples to the people. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. That you are meant to be a moderate society. So what? لِتَكُونُ شُهَدَاءُ عَلَى النَّاسِ وَيَكُونُ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. In order that you are an example, the people see you as an example of how we live, and the Prophet is the example for us. That we are told, لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, the Messenger of Allah, is the best example for us to follow. And when we want to speak about his manner in which he spoke, the manner in which he spoke, Allah Azza wa Jal says about him, مَا ضَلَّ صَاحِبُكُمْ وَمَا غَوَى وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَى إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَى. That the Messenger of God has never gone astray, nor has he ever went away from the righteous path, and nor does he speak from his desire. He doesn't say whatever appears in his thoughts or his tongue. He speaks from what? In huwa illa wahyun yuha. That what he says is verily or surely or certainly a revelation revealed. Whatever Allah Azza wa Jal tells him to say, لا يسبقونه بالقول وهم بأمره يعملون. They do not precede what they are supposed to say. They do not say what they think might be the correct thing. They only say what is the correct thing. And this is why when we are asked a question, a big problem these days is someone's asked a religious question, and the people that are present, when a alim deen is present, you see a scholar standing there, and someone asks him a question, every Tom, Dick and Harry decides that they've the ability to answer, and they come up with their own formulas and deductions. I think, in my opinion. Who cares about your opinion or my opinion? Islam is not based on my opinion. Islam, it's either you have the answer or you don't have the answer. In fact, you are accountable on the Day of Judgment if you say to someone, Allahul Alam. If you say Allah knows, you are accountable. Why? You're supposed to say, I don't know. When you say Allah knows, the person listening to you, when he asks you a question, if you say Allahul Alim, You are saying basically only God knows the answer, that no one else has this information. So you've left this person that asked the question thinking that there is no answer. On the contrary, you should be saying, I don't know. If the angels themselves did not have this pride and did not have the stubbornness to say that we know, ما لا علم لنا قالوا لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا. The angels said to God, we don't have the knowledge. If the angels of God were not stubborn enough to accept that they do not know, who are you? Who am I to not say that I don't know? So that when I speak, I should only speak what is right and what is correct. And the best speech is as-salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So don't speak just to make conversation. Don't speak just to let people know that you exist. Don't speak to let people know that you are alive. Make the words that you say a statement. Every time you talk, what you say is a statement. When Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam speaks about, he says, كَانَ لِي أَخٌ فِي اللَّهِ. That I had a brother. When he says fillah, means just, it's a general statement that there is a brother I once had that was a brother in faith. And then he speaks about the qualities of this person. And of the qualities, amazing, you read this, it's in Nahj al-Balagha. Of the qualities he mentions are totally against some of the things that we do, that I do. The things that a person should be like. And he goes on to say, كان أكثر دهره صماتا فإذا قال بذ القائلين. That all his life, the majority of the time, he was what? He was silent. He never spoke. But when he spoke, it says بذ القائلين. Basically, he silenced everyone that spoke. People would stand in awe. Imagine that when you speak, people say, so-and-so said this. It has weight. He said it. This person doesn't speak unless it's necessary. He doesn't give his opinion. You know, sometimes you're sitting in a gathering and everyone gives their 2 cents. Someone has an opinion on something, another person has a contrary opinion. Then there's that guy sitting in the corner, waits for everything. You know, once we were talking about economics, and we all have no qualifications in economics. And we were trying to discuss what the meaning of a recession was. And, you know, our qualifications, you know, a lot of people have a Google doctorate, you know, whatever we see in Google or Wikipedia, and we just regurgitate what we've just picked up. So we're saying this is a recession, that's a recession. There was one guy sitting with us who was studying, I think, his PhD in economics. He wouldn't say a word. He allowed us to talk. And then one of the brothers realized this guy hasn't said anything. So we turned to him and said, oh, what's a recession? And he said 3 consecutive economic downturns or something like that. He just gave the answer. I think that's the answer, unless someone can correct me. But he gave us the answer that we were debating for a while and we had no idea what we were talking about. And this guy knew the answer the whole time and just sat there and wouldn't say a word. That when he spoke, it was a statement. Imagine when you speak, there's exclamation marks at the end of everything. You say double underline, bold, it's highlighted. It comes there, it's glittering in gold and sparkles because you said it. One of the finest examples is the stance of Sayyida Zainab salawatullahi wa salamu alayha. A woman that the narrations say that people didn't even see her shadow. She was never out. A woman that was mastura. She wasn't someone that was out there raving mad, out there giving her opinion to everyone she saw. But when it came for the time for her to take a stand, she spoke that the people would say if they did not know that it was Zainab, it was as if it was Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam speaking. In her stance, in the way that she replied, every question that was put forward, every statement, and she sat there and she spoke and explained to the people. And up till today that we have our faith, we are indebted to her. We are indebted to Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam. We are indebted for her conveying the message of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, the stance of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. Because when she spoke to the point. She spoke what was necessary. She made a statement, not only in Kufa, but in Damascus. She made a statement, and what she said is what turned an empire, like the ruling party, or the ruling Khalifa of Al Sufyan, to fall on their head. That they were no longer ruling in Sham. And eventually the Umayyads fell and were slaughtered for a stance that she took, and words that echoed within these cities, and the people took them in and accepted them. When we look at taqwa and we hear Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi begin, we said, with mantiquhum as-sawab. The first thing with taqwa, he says, is the speech. And we turn to the verse that I mentioned yesterday, which I didn't get to explain. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهِ. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهِ, which is us. We are of the people that said رَبُّنَا اللَّهِ. Who here denies that Allah is their Lord? Who here denies that Allah is their creator? That we accepted God is that Allah is our God, our deity, the one we adore and venerate, the one that we worship. Then the verse in the Quran says, ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا. ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا basically means to make their stance firm. That we said we are Muslims, and we make this stance. How do we apply it to become firm? Because it says ثم استقاموا تتنزل عليهم الملائكة أن لا تخافوا ولا تحزنوا وأبشروا بالجنة التي كنتم توعدون. That you will not fear, nor will you grieve, and there are good tidings of paradise which you have been promised. So Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, says, وَلَقَدْ قَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلُّوا عَلَى مُحَمَّدْ وَآلِ مُحَمَّدْ. Says, وَلَقَدْ قَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ لَا يَسْتَقِيمُ إِيمَانُ عَبْدٍ. Now he's explaining this verse. That how do I make the belief firm? He says the belief of a servant is not firm. Rasulullah has said this. حتى يستقيم قلبه, until his heart has become firm. Taban, when we mention heart, always remember, we are not talking about the blood pump in your body. You're not talking about the organ of your body. You are talking about the spirit, the soul, the intellect. Until the qalb has become firm. And then he says, وَلَا يَسْتَقِيمُ قَلْبُهُ حَتَّى يَسْتَقِيمَ لِسَانُهُ. That the heart does not become firm until your tongue becomes firm in faith. فَمَنْ اسْتَطَاعَ مِنْكُمْ أَنْ يَلْقَى, listen to the words, أَنْ يَلْقَى اللَّهَ تَعَالَى وَهُوَ نَقِيُّ الرَّاحَةِ مِنْ دِمَاءِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ وَأَمْوَالِهِمْ سَلِيمُ اللِّسَانِ مِنْ أَعْرَاضِهِمْ فَلْيَفْعَلْ. This is the explanation of the verse. He has associated this tongue with what? That this tongue can cause what? It can cause the bloodshed of the believers. How often do you see someone get up and permit people to kill? They get up and they do takfir on someone else. They say, this person's kafir. You know, I remember there was this Facebook, I think, or Instagram entry of someone with a decapitated head in the Middle East. And this person's only concern, he says, brother, this is a good act, but was he a kafir? Poor guy, he's going to go have a sleepless night, not over the decapitated head. But is he sure this person's head that you've cut is a kafir's head? Is it permissible for you to kill a kafir to begin with? Just for no reason you to go out and kill. This guy's not worried about this, he's just worried it's okay you've killed him, but just, you know, don't make an error if it's a kafir. Remember last time they killed one of their own leaders? They killed one of their own leaders and they said, you know, these things happen. You know, I won't quote Tony Abbott, you know, when he spoke about, but these things just happen. You know, these things occur. These things take place. It's not like that. There is a day of judgment and you are accountable. Your tongue could cost what? You know, some people, they come around and they tell you, oh, it's okay, brother, for you to steal from the unbeliever. How often have you heard this? Someone say, this is an unbeliever, you can steal from them. You can steal from an unbeliever. You can kill an unbeliever. This is what they say. On the day of judgment, they're accountable. This tongue, they're accountable for what they say. And it says about their honor, which we will explain as we move along. If you are safe from these three, then your heart has become firm. And then you are of those that will not grieve on the day of judgment. You are of those that will not fear on the day of judgment, neither in this world. And you will be those that are granted, inshaAllah, we are all granted entry into paradise. We must be careful of what we say. A single statement that you may think is insignificant can cost you. If you recall the tradition, those that were present, and it's a very important story that Samahat Sayyid Hadi al-Mudarrisi mentioned 2 nights ago about a companion of Rasulullah. A companion who not only was with Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, was not only a companion who was a near companion, he was a companion on the day of Badr that made a statement. When the people around the Prophet said, listen, because they were aqillah, we were talking inshallah about Ma'arakat Badr on the 17th night, that they were only small in number, the army of Rasulullah, and the others were great in number, and the people saying, listen, you know, we don't have to fight. We can settle this in another way. And Sa'd was one of those that made a statement and gave morale to the believers. He was one that when the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam heard of his death, ran. They say he ran, they say that his abaya fell from his shoulders and he ignored it. And that his shoes, the sandals he's wearing, tore. And he continued to run barefoot to go wash the body of Sa'd. He washed his body. He put the kafan on his body. In another narration, which wasn't mentioned by the Sayyid, but you probably heard, that when he walked in the tashiyah of the jnazi, when he walked, you know, when you hear tashiyah, it means when you follow the jnazi, when you follow the what do they call it? The procession, or what they actually call the thing. Or you can call it a coffin or whatever. The body that's being carried, the funeral procession that they are following, the Prophet was walking on the tips of his toes. And they asked him why. He said, due to the amount of angels that are present. That this person had all this. And then after he is involved in the burial of this great man and puts him in the grave, then stands up, and his mother saying, good tidings to you, Sa'd, that you are going to paradise. And the Messenger of God says, basically, don't guarantee him or don't put him in that position where he's got paradise. He still has something to do that is got to be done to him. All this you've done, Ya Rasulullah, and there's still something. He says he had bad manners towards his wife. That the moment we leave, he'll be crushed in the grave. That the milk that she breastfed him will come out of his fingers and his toes. Come out of his fingertips from the crushing of this grave. You're accountable for what you say. Whether you're going to paradise or not. What you've done with your tongue, you are accountable for, and there's an answer for you. In another case where a man saw his father in his dream. His father was a pious man. He saw his father in his dream. And when he saw his father, he asked him, how is it? He says, well, Alhamdulillah, I'm enjoying the blessings and the bounties of God. He says, but when you leave, he says, I get my punishment. And he says, and for this, I can't see you. He used to come to him in his dream for several days. He said, what is your punishment? He says, this scorpion-like creature comes in and stings me on my tongue. And my tongue becomes so swollen. My body burns from this sting until the punishment goes away. I get my good days for what I've done, and then the punishment returns. So he says, what's this from? He says, go ask your mother. It is something that I did to her. So when he wakes up, he sees his mother, he says, my father, he speaks of his father's plight, this is what's happening. And the mother says to the son that I won't forgive him. Sometimes you hurt someone, and people tell you, you've got to be aware of this. Sometimes you might joke with someone, and they're okay with it, you know, you joke with each other, they're okay with it. Sometimes you might say something to someone, you hurt them, and they let you know. It's not that they don't let you know, they let you know. It's something people have got to be aware of. For example, if you borrow some money off someone, Mr. X borrows from Mr. Y, okay, borrows an amount of money, and then never asks him for the money back. See, if I lend you $100, but I never ask you for the money, I'd say, here you borrow, and I never ask for you to return. I can't ask on the Day of Judgment. God says, did you want that money? Yes. Why didn't you ask in the dunya? The only time you can ask is when you have already asked. You can't. Sometimes a person might have forgotten. Something might have went wrong. You have to actually go ask them. You owe me money. Could you pay me back? They say, to hell with you. And you say, all right, we'll see who's going to hell. This is when we can ask about it. Someone says something wrong. People don't have key. People don't have this sixth sense. People don't see things in other way. People don't understand. You have to explain. This is why we have communication. You have to come up to someone and go, Afwan, can I have a word with you? I really don't like when you call me that. Or I really don't like when you mention this thing about me. And the person says, oh, I was just having a lend of you. He says, no, I don't like when you have a lend of me. And then you say, Samahni, it won't happen again, ends there. But in this case, this mother would tell her husband, she didn't like when he'd call her this name. Just a nickname she didn't like. It would hurt her. And he didn't care. He was adamant. And he would do it, and she was really getting affected. Some people get, you might say, oh, sticks and stones. But it isn't the case for some people. Some people are really sensitive. Some people go home and they can't sleep at night. Really, I don't know this, but I've heard of this. There are people that get affected that badly. So you can't go around saying to people what you want. If they get affected, don't say it again. So anyway, this, and I speak Taban firstly to myself before I speak to any of you, in case I've said something to you. So anyway, this man said to his mother, please forgive my father. And after a while he would convince her, until he saw his father in the dream, and his father thanked him, and that was the last he saw of him in the dream, that he was in comfort. But to show you that every word you say can have an effect. Some words that you may say that you think will not be of any effect towards someone can be of a great effect. You may ignore it. Sometimes we might say something and we have a double meaning. Or we might say something for another reason. Allah Azza wa Jal knows what we are thinking. In the case of a story that also was mentioned by the Sayyid, he's mentioned this several years ago, several times, and it's one of these stories that's really effective. It's a story about a man that was traveling. Now, whether this story is true or not, most likely it is a true story because it's narrated from our ulama. But the thing is, the parable in it is what's so important. That a man was traveling to the Hajj. And before he left to the Hajj, he had amanet. Now when we look at the amanet in those days, okay, today when you have money, what do you do with it? The money that you want to have it put in a safe place, you take it to the bank, you have a safe at home. Back in the old days, they would bury it out in the backyard or something like that. You'd have a spot in the backyard, you'd put a bone there or something, you know, just hope a dog doesn't come past and pull it. But there, you would put a landmark, a mark where the money was. So this man left a great amount of ameni for his whole group. Imagine the whole group's going to the Hajj. Do I want to take all your money with you? Because your money was always on you, it was around you, it was when you moved, you took it with you. So they left it with this man. Why? Because the alim at the time said that this man is an amin, that this man's a trusted man. So they left the money with him. While they went to the Hajj, the man passed away. Upon returning, they wanted this trust that they had left. When they asked for it, they found that the man had died. His family looked and they didn't find it. So imagine you're the one that's left a trust for your whole group. You slap yourself on the forehead. What do I do? How am I going to pay back this group? So he went up to the alim, the marja at the time, and said, listen to my situation. This is my story. You told me that this guy is a trustworthy man, but the money's gone missing. I need to pay these people. So they search, they don't find the money. So the alim says, look, I will teach you a dua. I will teach you some words. You go to Wadi Salam in Najaf where he's buried. You read this dua and you will see him. Whether in a vision, in a dream, or whether you see a vision of some sort, you will see him and he will tell you where the money is. So the man goes there, first night, does the dua, nothing. Second night, nothing. Third night, nothing. He returns to the alim, he said, nothing. Nothing's happened. You told me to do this, it didn't work. So the marja says, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. He says, what's wrong? He says, if he's not in Wadi Salam, which is approximately 1,500 acres. It's considered one of the largest, if not the largest cemetery in the world. Imagine cemeteries, 1,500 acres. They estimate about 5 million people are buried there. It's an astronomical amount of people that are buried in this cemetery in Najaf al-Ashraf. And we also know through our traditions that the believers' souls are all taken there. So he says if his soul is not in Wadi Salam, then it's in Wadi Barahud, which is in the Yemen. This is where the souls of the wicked are taken to be punished. But how could it be that this man's an amin, a trustworthy man, a pious man, that his soul's been transferred to there? He says, you have no other choice but to go to Yemen and read this. So he goes there, he reads the dua. He sees a vision and he tells everyone to run. They all start screaming, everyone's running. You know, cemetery already on edge. Everyone's ready to run, especially when you're told this is the cemetery of the wretched and the damned and the wicked. Everyone's ready to run as it is. So they all take flight. They're all run away. And he says, I saw him in some kind of container. He is boiling and being burnt. And when he said, go see my neighbor the butcher, and he was being pulled back in. This is the vision he saw. He says, but as for your money, well, he tells him where the money is, but he says, go see my neighbor the butcher. Help me. Here's your money, but help me. So he returns and tells the alim his story. They find the amanet, they give him the amanet, and they return. Now the alim wants to fix this poor man's plight. So he says to them, tell his neighbor the butcher that I would like to come and visit him. You imagine today if an alim wants to visit your house. When you're talking about alim, you're talking about marja. A marja is about to come and visit your house. How would you prepare for this? This man's about to enter your house. So he's prepared the house, and this butcher, upon hearing that this marja will arrive, and when the marja arrives, he comes to sit with him. He says, I've come, firstly. He doesn't do the small talk, how the kid's house. He doesn't even know him. He comes back straight to the point. He says, I have a friend. My friend has a situation. He was your neighbor. He has an issue with you. I do not know of this issue, but I would like you to forgive him. And he says, I will never forgive him. May God burn him even more. So he says, hold on. We are trying to fix the situation here. How can we come to an understanding? How can we fix this problem? So he says to him, I have a daughter. And I knew another merchant who wanted my daughter for his son in marriage. And he says, my neighbor also wanted my daughter for his son, but he didn't tell me. In those days, you used to wait for your nasib. There was no Facebook for people to chat and get to know each other. There was no Instagram. There was none of that. There was no centers where girls and guys would meet and flirt with each other. أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. I feel humbled, honestly, to speak in the presence of Ayatollah Sayyid Hadi Mudarrisi, because most of the work, if not all of the work, is of his lectures that I have been honored to have learnt, and I try and deliver it in the best way possible that I can, which is pretty poor compared to the way his animated lecture is. Astaghfirullah Mawlana. So anyway, and this is not people that know me know I'm pretty direct and I'm serious when I speak. So anyway, just to let you know, in this story, which is his story, and he said several times, it's very enjoyable. The end of the story is this. So when he says to him that my daughter was about to get married because this man was to ask for her, a girl would not get her nasib all the time. She wouldn't get someone to come and ask for a hand. It wasn't like, these days some girls can reject up to 20 or 30 rejections. They could be a center in the NBA. They just send everyone packing. It's not like that anymore. Back in those days, a guy came in, whoa, checked out, it worked out. So this merchant turns up and he asks, says, General, you ask all the people in the neighborhood about this girl. So who are you going to ask? The neighbors, because they know everything. And when it comes to marriage especially, there is no ghiba in this sense that if someone's coming to ask, you have to tell them if this person's a good, you can't sit there and say that, this person, some people they say, no, you have to say that this person has 1, 2, 3 as an issue. Because it's marriage. But you don't keep talking about them till kingdom come, just for that instance. So he's his direct neighbor, and because he wanted the girl for his son, he hasn't even asked if his son wants her. But he had in his head, I want the girl for my son. When he was asked about this matter, All he said, remember next door neighbors, they've been living so many years next to each other. They asked him, what's the situation with the butcher's daughter? He said, I don't know. Imagine someone that's known you for so long says, I don't know. What does that mean? That's the nicest thing I could possibly say. That's what it means. Everything else, you know, she's got a whole cemetery in her closet. That's basically saying that. Not a skeleton. So he's put this girl under doubt, under a shroud. Just a small statement like this, it cost him what he was going through. So in the end, the alim remedies it by marrying his daughter to one of the men with him and allows this man to be forgiven. But why should I put myself in that situation? Initially, why should I put myself in this situation? Why should I make myself suffer when I can cleanse my tongue? Over the next 2 nights, I'm going to associate them with the tongue as well. Because it's very important. Because with this, our taqwa is achieved. When we seal our tongues, this is where our taqwa is achieved. The other 2 things that we sin with, they need some effort. Your stomach and your private part need some effort. With your tongue, it's there. You can just say what you want there and then. You know, unless you're a deviant, you don't do the other 2 things publicly, generally. But with your tongue, it's an automatic sin. We have a request. One of the brothers says that he has a friend whose daughter has been diagnosed with an illness, with cancer, and she's young. And tonight we want to read the verse, أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ 5 times. Inshallah, all of you have been fasting righteously, and the barakah of your dua, she is cured from this, and patience is poured upon the hearts of her parents. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما مضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, we ask you, Allah, to cure this sick girl بحق الإمام زين العابدين عليه السلام, and to cure all the sick of the people that are present here ببركة الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.